getting my dad to say I love you.
To say what?
Say nonsense.
Outrageous.
Bloody nonsense.
All right, dads. This week we've got Gareth Reynolds, who I'm interviewing. You've been reading about Gareth Reynolds for me?
A little bit, yes. He's a very successful comedian, entertainer, yes.
An entertainer, I'll tell him that. Very successful comedian, entertainer. Also a podcaster with a very successful podcast called The Dollop.
Well, isn't that an entertainer in the current world?
It is an entertainer. Yeah, I wasn't saying you were wrong.
That's why I was trying to make it
more broad. You're making it broader. You've been very sweet. He's got a very successful podcast, and you should like that. It's about American historical figures.
American historical figures. Yes.
The Dollop. They normally talk about a famous person from history with his co-host Dave Anthony, and then they sort of recap an event, and he learns stuff from it. It's kind of like me learning stuff from you.
Oh right, yes, okay.
Yeah. So, and he's American. He's got a British family. I know that from his stand-up when we've done shows together. So
he came from Milwaukee or somewhere up.
Yeah, he's from the northeast part of America. Yes,
where they do quite good beer, I think.
I'm gonna go chat to Gareth and find out about his parents.
So I couldn't work out, were his parents English? Yes.
Yeah, his mum and his grandmother's English. His grandmother's definitely English. I'm gonna get more details from him, and then I'm gonna see you later. All right, I love you.
Okay.
Welcome, my guest for this week's podcast, Mr. Gareth Reynolds. How are you, mate?
Good, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, man. I'm good. And what I like to do at the top, rather than do all the small talky things that us Brits love to normally do, I want to just get straight into it and find out, have both your parents said the phrase "I love you" before in your direction?
Yes.
Okay.
My father to a point where I was a kid where I was like, I get it, just stop.
Oh, really?
I love you so much. Yeah.
Really? He was giving it out all the time.
Yeah, he went through like a weird like midlife-y thing, and then he went to a cave for like 3 weeks with other men in their 40s and like beat drums with their shirts off, and he came back and he was always like, "Do you want to talk about your feelings?" And I was like, "No, I'm pissed off." And he'd be like, "I love you." I'd be like, "Just stop saying that."
This is amazing. I want to. So, can we drill in? Let's drill down into that a bit more. What is the caveman thing? That feels like something like if you wrote that in like a script, someone would go, "It's a bit too on the nose." No one actually does that, but your dad actually.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably. Yeah, it's either been in films or now people would be like, obviously that's a bad example, but something like the cave drumming with their shirts off for midlife crisis. Yeah, I mean, my parents were like had the weirdest marriage where like they were pretty much not together for most of my childhood, but they kind of pretended they were, or they were like separated, and so I could never really figure out what was going on. And then during one of their many sort of fluctuations, my father was just like really struggling. And my mother is very English in the way that it's like feelings are something you ignore, you know what I mean? Like, and my father was like, "I need to find out what's inside of me as a man," and and then he like told her, and then so I was a kid, and she, I'd be like, "Where's he going?" And she'd be like, "Oh, he's just going off to the cave with other men to just bang a drum or something like that." And then he came back and he had like this drum that he'd made, and he was like, "I want to explain why this drum is important to me." And I'd be like, I'm like 11.
Amazing.
What the fuck is happening right now?
That's so fun. Your dad basically had a gap year, a very compact gap year, as we'd call it in the UK.
Yeah. He had like a 40s Rumspringa.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And your mum, that's funny that your mum is, because I've seen your stand-up about your mum, and you paint her as this very, very small British lady, which is partly why I wanted to have you on here as an American with British parents. It's kind of a fun little juxtaposition of you guys. So is she less effusive with the loves than your dad? She didn't go into a cave and bang a drum, or was she always just like, "I love you, but let's not make a scene about it," that sort of thing?
Yeah, it was more like that. Very loving, but yeah, not as on the nose of, the emotional stuff. Even now, like anytime it gets a modicum of emotion with my mother, she will kind of be like, oh, we don't need to get in all that. You're like, well, no, this is like serious shit. But I think also because my father became so tapped into it that she probably, because they did not like each other, she probably even veered harder in the other direction.
Yeah.
Love. We don't say love in this house. We like each other a lot.
Yeah.
But she's very sweet still, and we do tell each other we love each other now, like often. But my father would be like, I was talking about this on stage the other night. Just I don't even remember how it came up, but when I was like 7 years old, 6 or 7, very young, we were at the 4th of July fireworks in Wisconsin, and I was just being a little ham in front of all these older, drunken Wisconsin couples that were there with my parents. And I just started talking about what I thought sex was. And I said, and someone just was like prodding me. Someone was like, wait, what is sex? And I was like, sex is when the guy puts his penis in the girl's butt and he pees. And they just lost their minds. And then my father like pulled me off to the side and he was like, I want to explain to you what sex really is. And I was just like, oh my God, no, this is not what I had intended. And he was like, it's a beautiful, loving expression. And I was like,
wow.
Oh God, it's revolting what he's doing.
That's more revolting than your description of sex.
Yeah. And it would have been great if he was like, you put your penis in the butt and you do pee, but it is the loving, it's a way of expressing.
It's making love to someone's bum with urine rather than...
You shoot your love pee into the bum. And that's what. But he goes on to explain it, and he caps it. The fireworks are going off in the background. I'm missing the fireworks, and he goes, it's a lot like fireworks. And I was like,
oh wow,
my God, you've like ruined fireworks and sex so quickly.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I was so young.
Kaiser Soze, that description. He just saw a thing.
Yeah,
and said that was it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it limps. Oh, it is a limp. The limp is fake.
Oh, that's hilarious. What a sweet man.
What about what are your parents like with that sort of stuff?
I love it when I'm chatting to, this happens a lot on here, when I'm chatting to another podcast host, they just flip that shit around on me halfway through. You're asking me the questions. But it's interesting. No, I know what you mean.
Curious, nature versus nurture.
Yes, of course.
Because your father is such a goddamn character.
Yeah, it's really funny because... no, I like doing it. I think it's more natural, right? It's quite weird for me to just be, tell me all about your life, and I will tell you nothing about it.
And for me to be like, next, what is your next question of my life?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. I was thinking, I keep when you say stuff like about your parents together, my parents are still together.
Right.
And they do, but like for my whole childhood, I was like, if they'd got divorced at any point, I'd be like, yeah. That makes sense. Do you know, like, of course.
Yeah,
because
totally.
I know every relationship's different, but they're very. My whole childhood just constant arguing and stuff. So I've kind of really sought to have I hate conflict because of this, and I kind of will do anything to avoid that sort of thing in my relationship. But they've always been like that. But they're quite amusingly just now. My mum. But I honestly think my mum is with my dad because she finds him funny. Just. To laugh at, not even with, just at. She just went in our WhatsApp group. She went, "Guess what your dad's doing in the car right now?" And I went, "I don't know." She goes, "It's hilarious. I'm going to send you photos." And it's him just like uncomfortably climbing on seats and stuff. And she just found it. Someone had blocked his door so he couldn't open it. So she just found it funny watching a big guy try to climb over seats in a small car.
You just imagine all those keys jangling, getting caught on stuff. His key collection.
Yeah. Is over his filthy car. Yeah, so, but he's funny. And then weirdly, I showed that to another friend just now. This is all kind of the universe working in weird ways, if you believe in that shit, but how it's just all very on top of it.
I do. I go to a cave and drum, so I'm very...
Yeah, I've got... Yeah, you can get it passed on to me from my father.
I get it.
You get the cave drumming so well. And then another mate was talking about his dad just now in a text to me, but it's impossible to communicate. And I realized my dad only really talks about history, food, and how much money I got paid for something. Those are the only three things he could talk about.
Yeah, the money. That's the thing with my family.
How much?
The money is always. Yeah.
How much was it?
Yeah, always.
Just anything. Is it? Maybe that's a.
Oh, that's a good amount. Oh, that's not enough.
Yes. Is that a British? Well, I don't know if it's British. Americans care about money. We're a capitalist countries either way, right? So,
My mother, though, it feels a bit incongruent with my mother sometimes, the amount that she cares about money. Like,
Why is it incongruent with her?
Well, I just think because you would, when you grew up in England in the time where she grew up, they grew up really poor. And then my mother's around for like the 70s and 80s where it was just like you could buy a house for like £800 and, and that was it. And then so she has a very comfortable life, but she still will like penny pinch and, is obsessed with money. Like if her gas bill is like £30 for 3 months, she'll be on the phone with the gas company just sort of like, you're not going to do this to me. You will not do this, and I'm just like, Mom, you have the money. It's not about the money. I'm like, well, it is about the money. You just pay the fucking thing. Still does hot water bottles versus puts heats on,
Oh, wow.
Like,
that's old school, mate.
She does two. She'll do one for her feet and one for her legs. Like
amazing. That's like student living. That's like don't turn the heat. Just wear 9 sweaters instead of turning the heat on.
That's a very good comparison for what my mother lives like a student.
She's like a student without any roommates. It's like or maybe she has roommates. I don't know. I don't know.
She probably does.
I said it like I know you.
No, she probably rents a cupboard to someone I don't know it or something like that.
Yeah, that's funny. Which part of the UK does she live in? London.
No, she lives in Stourbridge. So West Midlands, nearest Birmingham.
Yeah.
Wolverhampton-y.
I haven't done a show. Oh, yeah, okay, right. I know Wolverhampton. I've done a show there. I did not enjoy that show at all. Nothing against Wolverhampton. I'm sure people are lovely, but the gig I did was absolutely average. That's funny. It's a funny thing, that isn't it? But you're saying I wonder why. But isn't that because of growing up? My mum grew up poor, and she's very much. I think it's like, I will become poor again if I'm not careful with my money. Is that not where it comes from?
I think it's definitely part. Yeah, I think it's definitely part of that. I mean, I have that. I have that completely where I am like, I think it's partially the parental thing. And then I think it's partially that when I first moved to LA, my job was I dressed up like superheroes for kids' birthday parties. That was like my first job. I did that.
When we got here, loads of British people were doing that. And Hannah nearly did that as a little side job. And then she got told...
I'm glad she avoided it.
Yeah, she got... sorry to tangents on that. She got told, if you're going to do it, you have to come for training where you don't get paid and you have to share a hotel room with some other person. She was like, I'm done.
What?
No. And then another mate of mine told me he did it. There's like different companies. So I don't know if this is one company was like the really rich one. And one was like, they'll send you anywhere. And he said he got sent down to like Compton and some guy whipped a gun out because they weren't happy with what he did. And he had to like run into his car dressed as like Mr. Incredible and drive away while someone's waving a gun.
People are like, Mr. Incredible, you'll outrun the bullets. What is he doing? What are you
driving? Why is Mr. Incredible driving a Fiat Punto? It doesn't make any sense.
I have a joke about that where I'm Batman and the kids want to see the Batmobile and they follow me to my car and you're trying to just justify why you drive like a broken ass Honda Civic. But I did the parties for probably 4 years and then got some good work and I was able to walk away and I was like living like an idiot. I was like, I'll buy dinner, all this stuff. And then eventually ran out of money and had to go back to them. So I think that trauma combined with the English, nature of the way my mother still views poverty is right around the corner. Like my mother will, it basically sounds like a magic wall in her town where people will just put things on this wall to take. And the amount of stuff that my mother will go take that she doesn't need, like stuff like spoons,
I love
that. Just like odd ceramics, and she'll hold them up like they are like animal heads that she's just come back from the kill, and has just got enough meat to fortify through the long cold winter. And I'll be like, but you don't need any more champagne flutes.
A spoon sticking out of the wall, just like a tiny spoon.
Yeah, look, I remember that hunt. That was not an easy one. I had to pull that away from a little child's sausagey fingers when he was trying to get his hands on the spoon at the same time. But she'll like hold up like a thing of champagne flutes and be like, look at these. And I'm like, it's just you. You don't need 4 more flutes. You have plenty. But she... so she was in LA one time. I made her get rid of this, but she found a head of lettuce on the ground and took it home to prepare. And because it was in the bag from the store, felt that it was okay. And I was like, no, not only is it not okay, like, this is just not, you're not in Stourbridge. This is like, Echo Park. Don't be eating street lettuce. I'll buy you lettuce.
That's funny. She probably didn't even wash it. She probably wanted to just give it a quick blow and rub on her jumper, that'll do.
Well, she's certainly the person who goes, it says pre-washed. And I'm like, no, I'm not into the pre-wash fabrications, but they've already washed it. I'm like, they haven't. I don't believe that they have. In this country, I don't believe there is a station dedicated to someone like, hold on now, let's get the germs off this lettuce.
I agree. Can I just, on this is another tangent. I do rinse the lettuce in water, but then I realize, what are we doing there? That's not doing anything, is it? Do you know what I mean? It's not just giving it a rinse.
The water isn't.
The water's not. Have you got vegetable wash? Have you got vegetable wash?
Yes. I make vegetable wash. I've wondered
about this. Tell me about vegetable wash. Okay, right.
I dilute apple cider vinegar and lemon. And that I read was a pretty... Now, again, it's not like the germs are like, run for the hills, But to me, the water wash has never made any sense.
The water wash has never made any sense. Yeah, I still do it like a sheep. But what you're saying is also made me laugh, because I feel like anything around the house where you're looking for a natural version, just apple cider vinegar. What is that? What is it?
Everything.
Everything. What is it?
It's apple cider vinegar and lemon. But everything.
Sorry, is your leg falling off your body? Just rub a bit of apple cider vinegar. That will sort that out.
It is. Everything is everything. You're doing a cleanse, you need apple cider. Well, wake up, take some apple cider vinegar. I'll put a little apple cider vinegar on that fungus. That'll get right rid of it.
I can't wait till the day I get cancer and just go, but I had apple cider vinegar all my life.
Yeah, that's not going to do it. We're going to need to send you to chemo, which is mainly apple cider vinegar.
Imagine that you go in and so what is in this intravenous drip? Well,
it's a little bit of lemon and but it's mainly apple cider vinegar diluted. It's basically a vegetable wash.
It's a vegetable wash. It's the thing that Gareth Reynolds puts on his lettuce. That's going in your body right now.
Yeah, then I'm like that the woman who came up with that the blood testing thing from Walgreens, Elizabeth, whatever. Rocking Silicon Valley with they unmasked me to only have apple cider vinegar.
I can see you doing a big unveiling, just you there, moustache, just in a cool in a hoodie and stuff. Hood over, hood over your head.
NSYNC mic,
whip it back. Yeah. Got NSYNC mic. Hold up a little thing. Not a lot of people realize
the future is with us. As I'm in jail eventually.
Apples, cider, vinegar. Combine. Oh, funny shit! This is so not about. This
can fit in your pocket. Yeah.
Oh fuck me! It's making me laugh so much. Okay. My favorite bit of the podcast.
That is true, though.
We do not
if you ever Google anything that's just like 10 household hacks. 4 of them are apple cider vinegar based.
It is always. It's fun. That's an observation I think I wrote in my book ages ago. I felt like if I did that at a gig, no one's going to care. What I need is an audience full of you that I can just.
I think you'd be surprised. I bet you in California it would go over well.
It's true.
I mean, the other thing with the apple cider vinegar is when you use it, it's like, when things gross you out that shouldn't. Like but it's almost like seeing how the sausage gets made. When a big chunk of the apple comes out of the apple cider vinegar, I'm just like, oh, yucky.
Yeah, it's true.
This is gross. It's like you eat these. These are apples. I'm like, that is icky and pooey, and I want no part of it.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very funny. Oh man.
Try it out next hour.
Gross! A pre-cut chunk covered in cider.
Oh my god! I think this came from apples.
Oh my god!
Horrifying.
Man. My face hurts from laughing. What's the podcast about, Chris? Well, a lot of people think it's about parenting, which actually, like most things in life, is actually about apple cider vinegar.
The key to parenting is apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, it is. Fuck, what were we talking about? We were talking about, it doesn't matter anymore.
Poor. Well, and that came off of the washing the lettuce, which
Washing
is
the
due to
lettuce,
the poverty
that's funny.
mind that my family will never shake.
Come here, son.
Let's vaguely steer this back onto a course, but I'm always happy to go down a nice little side street into Apple Cider Vinegar Road.
Of course.
But the poor thing's interesting. So when you came to LA and your parents are British, so they moved to America together? Is that what happened?
Yeah, my mother had my brother, and we pretend that father was Robert Plant and left because my brother has never met his real father, but he was super young. Right. Then she met my father. They got married super soon after that. My father somehow got offered a job in Ohio. He took the job. They went to Ohio, and my mother thought she was moving to Beverly Hills, and they went to Ohio. And then, just really started living like a Midwestern American lifestyle. And my mother, who is, just as English as they come, experienced extreme culture shock. And then they moved to Wisconsin probably about 4 or 5 years after that. And then I was born in Wisconsin to them. And it was, and I kind of walked, basically like my life was like walking in the middle of like a heated conversation. And then I was just like, there's a lot of tension in this house. Wait, were you guys talking about me?
You come out your mum's you come out the womb and like, hey guys, break it up. All right, break it up.
Enough. Yeah, the doctors are separating my parents. Now, someone slap the baby when we get a minute.
They're arguing over who's going to cut the umbilical cord, and you're just like, someone cut the fucking umbilical cord.
Yeah, it looks like that apple that came out of the vinegar, actually.
So I'm curious then, your mum, both British, and then your mum lives in the UK, and your dad, does he live in the UK again, or is he still in America?
No, he still lives in Wisconsin. Interesting.
So do you move from there to
That's
LA?
my way of saying they're not together anymore.
Yeah, well, I figured that from context. It'd be amazing if they were still together after.
Yeah, but actually, it would be the only way to make it work, honestly.
Yeah. What was it? Yeah, what if they're in different countries?
Yes.
Yeah. They've just got a Zoom. They've got a very long distance relationship for 20 years. So did you? Yeah. When you decide, did you go? You kind of had the weird jobs and stuff. Did you go into entertainment pretty soon after? Did you go to? I'm just curious how they took that. Your mum with a poverty mindset. So mine was very much like, what are you doing? Trying to do comedy. And when I started making money, she was like, okay, cool. And then she saw me do stand-up and was like, I don't know whether you should do this anymore, because I had an awful gig that she first came to. But
I have the same first experience with my mother seeing me do stand-up.
Well, tell me that. Then. Tell me that story, because I want to hear. Well,
okay, so that was basically, my mother has lived in LA on and off a couple of different times. And now kind of splits her time a little bit more betwixt the two, but mainly she's English. But she had lived in LA for probably 3 years and was getting ready to move back. And she had never seen me do stand-up. And I was actively, on the road and doing gigs in LA pretty often at that point. And we were having dinner, and she was leaving in like 2 or 3 days or something. And I had a gig that night, and I said something. And I didn't really bother me, but I did find it a little strange. And so I think I said, last chance to see a gig while you're here, but this would not be the gig. There's 30 other gigs I would have invited her to. Mm-hmm. And she, well, maybe I will come. Maybe I will come. And I go, well. And it was now, do you remember the John Lovitz Comedy Club?
No, I think I got here after that.
Lucky.
That pause spoke volumes about the gig.
Where was it? It was in Universal City. So, which also is just like the dumbest LA name for a place.
Yeah.
But you basically, to get to the club, you have to pay like $20 to park in Universal City. So it's just like a huge ask for someone to go.
They get the bad mood when they get
there.
They
are, and it's a huge. It's part of Universal Studios. So it is like. It's in a mall. It is. It's like on the third floor. It's just a pain in the ass. And I sort of am going like, it's probably not the best one to go to, but I am headlining, quote unquote, which, doesn't mean like hey, here's the guy you came to see. It's really, hey, this guy, we're gonna make this guy go last. Hopefully he doesn't bail.
And how long have you been doing stand up at this point? How experienced do you feel you are?
Probably about 6-ish years. So
Okay.
I definitely have good
decent.
material,
You're
but
decent,
I'm definitely having shows still that are, not great. But more shows are good than bad. But this club I knew was not great because they kept offering me headlining spots. So I'm going, anywhere that's offering me this amount of headlining spots is not, there's something wrong. Like, I don't even want to tell them that this is a red flag.
Yeah.
And the club was set up with, first of all, you didn't need 3-tiered seating because, again, it was not like the opera, and people were not attending this club, as you can tell by the fact that it's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But it did. It had like a smaller downstairs, and then it had like a second tier, and then it had a third tier.
Oh,
so
God.
it had like enormous theater seating, but it was like 150 seats or something like that. It was just not from design. It was like if Bar Rescue came in, the guy would lose his shit so quickly. He would just be screaming at like, bring me the architect. And so I tell her, I'm like, I'm setting expectation, like, this, it's not the best club, and I get there and it's one of those shows where it's like, all right, there's 15 comics and then you'll go up and I'm going, oh, for fuck's sake. So by the time it gets to me, the room is just dead. The people are sick of it, whether there's been good comedy or bad. People are leaving. There were probably 40 people to begin with.
Oh,
by the time
God.
it gets to me, it's dropped down to about 20 people. And by the time it actually gets to me, I see people getting ready to leave. And so I recognize that I know the feeling where you're like, I'm going to eat shit. This is an eat shit night. I'm going to eat shit up here. And I say to my mother, I go, I'm going to bring you up on stage and have you sit next to me while I do this. And she's, well, why?
Oh,
and I said, because this room is dead, that I need to do so I'm like, I'm going to get up there and then I'm going to bring you up. And she's like, okay, I'm just anything to like spike the ratings. So I get up there, and I go, it's funny. My mother has never seen me do stand-up before. And since this room is toxic, I'm going to bring my mother up here and have her, so you guys can sort of listen to me, but also watch my mother watch me do stand-up for the first time, which I'm like, maybe it will get a pulse in this room to some extent. So I bring up a little chair, sit her down, and she's there. And it again, doesn't move the needle much. It's not like people are like, oh, I'm going to stick around. People are still leaving. People are like, this is weird. But so she's sitting there, and I'll go on like a 6-minute chunk that at times murders, and it just dies. And I'll look at her and I'll go, you see, this normally does well, but here it is bombing.
I'm feeling
And as I'm doing probably 20, 25 minutes, and at one point, as I'm going through it, I am doing a bit, and I look over, and she is picking lint off of her leggings. She's like in her own world.
Amazing.
She is totally ignoring me, and I'm like, you're ignoring me. And you're on stage, and I'm your son, and you've never seen this before, and you're disinterested. And and it was a merciless beating. With
what did she say afterwards? What did she say afterwards? That's what I'm.
What she said afterwards was, "Oh yes, no, I mean I thought it went all right," and then she kept saying, the couple days after the idea that I brought her up on stage, she thought was admirable. I kept thinking that was a good idea you did that. That was a good idea that you've done that. So she thought it was impressive that I was trying to solve the puzzle, but acknowledged the fact that, there was just no pulse in the fucking room. The room was dead.
Amazing. So that's having seen you eat shit and then probably go, oh, but like, was she supportive when you went, I'm going to do this, before she'd even seen you? Was she still supportive after that? Like, was your I'm interested, because the thing I kind of always talk about on this is like, the two kind of things are a fearlessness and fearlessness and hard work are kind of two things. Or fearlessness and the desire to want to have this alternative career, and the hard work to succeed at it are the two common denominators. So I'm just curious of whether they supported that alternative avenue for work, and also whether you're a hardworking guy from the outside, it seems anyway. You might be fucking completely just lucky but you do your podcast, you're on the road all the time, so you've worked hard to get where you are. So I'm like, does the hard work get installed in you as well as the fearlessness, from both or either?
I mean, well, the first part, I mean, I think I gravitated to. I was not a good student. The only thing that I had ever really achieved in school was drama or acting or improv. I started doing a lot of improv in high school, and so I think that. And I actually didn't talk to my father, not because of the cave drumming, for most of high school, and then we started to have a relationship again when I was in college. So there really, with my father, there wasn't necessarily a time where I was like, "Hey, I'm going to pursue this." I just kind of started to do it. But he helped me go. He helped pay for my college, which was a theatrical-ish school, and. My mother, I think, I think she definitely would have craved more stability, but was not supportive. I mean, I think she recognized that it was kind of the only heat that I had found in the world that, it was the only thing that and I'd wanted to do it for so long. So I think she was sort of maybe preconditioned a little bit to the idea that was going to be what I pursued. But even then, when I moved to LA, it was. I remember one time I worked construction for my brother for a good time too, and I remember I'd made a pilot for Comedy Central, and it got passed on, and then things. This is right before I went back to kids' birthday parties. Things were really starting to kind of just fall apart, And I remember my brother at one point. I needed to borrow money from my brother, and I was just sitting there eating a free meal at his house with his wife, and who they were there. And he just goes, "So what's your plan?" I was just like, I just was like, I don't know. Yeah, and so she definitely hung in there, but I definitely think there was, my brother was certainly like. Suggesting maybe I start taking like tiling classes and get the hourly rate up at construction and things, and I was rejecting that, going like, look, this is just like a holding spot. And then once there were, once some things started to happen, I always had blips. It wasn't consistent, but I always had blips because I was working pretty hard, and I think that really kind of helped keep her supportive and keep them feeling like if I kept working hard, it would at some point change. I didn't start doing stand-up until I was 30. I didn't start when I started doing comedy in LA, I didn't want to do stand-up for ages because I just did not like the idea of it. It just seemed too hard. But then eventually I bit the bullet and just kind of went into that, and that opens up a whole new avenue. And then podcasts really helped me a lot. So I think since then, obviously, they're supportive, but it was tough, but they never were like, have you thought about being a lawyer or anything like that? There was never that
pressure.
Talk, really.
Interest. And did your mom have a job when she was in Wisconsin?
Yeah, she was a toy sales rep. So she would go around to toy companies and try to sell them toys.
Interesting. Was she successful? Is she successful? When you were a kid, then was she out? Were both parents out working even before your dad kind of lost touch?
My dad had a more traditional, day in Wisconsin job, but yeah, my mother was on the road a lot. My mother would go drive. She would drive all around the Midwest, and yeah, they both did well.
She was the road comic. She'd
she was totally the road comic. Well, it's always so funny now because I'll be like, I've got to go to whatever New Jersey this weekend. Oh, I remember I had a toy convention. She's got one story that is adjacent to every location.
That's good.
I had a layover in Sacramento, not a lovely town, that sort of stuff. So she can relate on every level. But it was in the 90s or 80s. It was a lot easier to carve out a living, but they both did pretty well. It was not like, my friends were definitely had families that were very affluent. Mine was more of a middle class, but they were never like, it was never like my mother who would be like, when I hear her stories about we'd get meat once a week. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I know. That's why my parents don't understand my veganism. My mum's like, why would you not?
Oh, yeah. I'm a vegetarian, yeah. Yeah. Why would you not eat meat?
Why would you not eat meat with just all meat? Why would you not just eat a plate of meat every day when that's available to you now? But that's interesting, though, because then whether they're telling you to or not, you see them out hustling. And that's interesting compared to your friends being. That's something that connects with me weirdly. A lot of my, because I went to a very nice school, but my dad was like having to hustle to get me. Like, man, he was pulling some. Like, I don't know what shit he was pulling to like keep me in there, but it'd always be this thing where I feel like he had to, I don't know, like mug someone the day before he had to pay the fees.
He probably just had keys that worked on certain doors. Just so sneak you in.
If anyone hasn't seen on my Instagram, Gareth must have seen this video of my dad has so many keys.
There's like a few.
Like about 50 keys on his keychain. It's crazy.
Lunacy.
He's just a disorganized human. But then I wonder if that's the thing then. When you're around those people who have everything relatively easily and your parents are like, not necessarily, it's not like they're every day like, I gotta work. Do you see them just having to like constantly be hustling to give you a decent life? It's sort of, that's ingrained in you. So when you go into the comedy, you're like, well, I can either just, well, you said you had a Comedy Central thing and it didn't go. You could have just gone, well, that's annoying. I'll wait for the next thing. But then obviously there's part of you that is inbuilt to keep hustling and keep doing those kids' parties to keep you afloat whilst you're kind of working on your stand-up? Or am I just completely projecting a thing in you that isn't there?
That'd be hilarious if it was full. Not at all, actually, Chris.
No shit, Chris. You just
Chris, you're crying, so I'm not sure what's going on with you. No, that's very true. I mean, I think that I did see them work hard. I mean, and yeah, I also think that when I watch. There are friends of mine who I grew up with who, again, were basically handed great situations. I don't know if you're as prepared to be a boss. I mean, you see it a lot where it's like it kind of skips a generation or a couple generations. It's like within your family, a couple generations will struggle, and then someone will probably, I mean, I have relatives who have done very well, and like their kids do well as well, but it's not the same where you've had to kind of carve out your own thing and really stress about money and stuff like that. When you really, when you live out here and you kind of work in this business, you do just start to recognize if you don't have that safety net. If you don't, I remember when I went to college, there was a friend of mine. When I was in college, I would do a lot of voiceover stuff to make money. I worked at a couple restaurants too, but I would also, I'd have like weird little entertainment-y gigs that would be enough to keep me afloat. But I would have friends that would try to relate to me. I'd be like, I'm broke. I'd be smoking GPCs and, be eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And, I'd have friends who, I'm broke too, and then my one friend would go, I'm so broke. Let's go get some sushi. I'll put in my dad's credit card. And I'd be like, wait, no, you're not. That's not broke. Like that's not what I'm experiencing in the world. But I definitely think that, you kind of sink or swim based upon your ability to reinvent, pick yourself up off the mat. And, I've had many versions of stability that just have kind of gone away, even recently, where I was like writing on shows for years. And then that has kind of like, for the time being, evaporated. And so the luxury of that is that there's always options for which you can kind of find which way, what is the best direction to go right now, where's the heat. But the downside of that is that it took years and years of getting kicked in the dick with things that you thought were going to work out that just didn't. So I think it's a combination. I mean, it's a combination of, parents' work ethic, also probably having, parents that, my mother especially grew up, so poor that, she made me feel poor at times, even though we weren't poor. And then actually experiencing being poor on my own multiple times in LA where I'm like, I don't have enough to pay for my bills, or I have to borrow money, or have to downsize, or whatever it is, I think all of those.
Yeah, you're right. It's some stuff is like lived experience as well as the stuff you've kind of seen them go through. It all adds to what is Gareth Reynolds, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's time for me to go to the cave and beat the drums soon.
Yeah, I know. So I'm curious. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. You said you and your dad fell out for a bit. Was there any specific reason that brought that about? You don't have to talk about it if it's too uncomfortable. But
I'll talk about it for money. No. I what if that I got to there?
Mate,
$100, I'll tell you all about it.
Apple cider vinegar as you would like. That's what
If it doesn't have the gooey apple guts, I'll take it. No, basically what happened was, they had this very, like when I was about 7, 8 years old, something like that, my parents sat me down and they were like, we're getting separated. And I was like, oh, you're getting divorced. They were like, no, we're getting separated. Like when I got braces when I was a kid, and the orthodontist put 4 braces on my teeth, and that was it. And every dentist I've ever gone to is like, what? That's not a thing. Like, so it was kind of the like relationship version of like bridging this weird, of like the 4 teeth braces. They were like, we're getting separated. So it was like they weren't getting divorced. They weren't together. My father was moving out, but he was still going to be there a bit. I think they were trying to kind of like preserve my sanity to some extent, but in the long run, they only, elongated a nightmare. But so it was very confusing. And that went on for like 7 years. My parents would be back together, it would seem like. There were no like updates where they were going, just so you know, we're trying to work it out. Now he's leaving again. I would just kind of be sitting there going like, oh, he's back. He's moving stuff in. He's spending the night here. They're sleeping in the same bed. Oh, he's leaving again. He's not coming back. Oh, he's back, but now he's sleeping on the couch bed. But they still seem to be like kind of affectionate towards. So I was always trying to kind of gather.
Australian. It does like an Australian, just kept coming back and crashing on the sofa.
Yeah, he's just walking about. Yeah, and he and never had shoes either. Yeah. So very similar. But so I was kind of left to construct what I thought it was for a long time. Well, then when I was about 14, knowing some more information now, what was going on was my mother wanted to take another crack at it. And this was coming off of a time when my mother had said she didn't want to take another crack at it. Well, at some point in there, my father, at the secondary place that he kept which I went a couple times, he shared a duplex with these Milwaukee twins named Ellen and Eileen. And I'd go there every now and then. It would be like, like when you watch a cop movie from like the early 90s or late 80s, and he opens the fridge and it's like, got some soy sauce, some mayonnaise, and he smells the mayonnaise. He's like, whoa, don't use that. You had one beer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just beer, like a baking soda, apple cider vinegar. It was basically that. And so my mother had suggested, let's take another crack at it. My brother was now working at the place where my father worked, but my brother was working in the warehouse. And my brother went over there one day and realized my father was sleeping with a woman who worked at the company. And so my brother was kind of now privy to this information. Well, he, held on to it for a couple days, trying to figure out how to tell my mother. Told my mother. My mother was completely heartbroken by it. And then that kind of trickled down onto me. Oh. And then, so I kind of like found that out. And the combination of watching my mother shatter, as well as feeling like, there was this total other side of my father's life, just kind of fell upon me in a way where I just, I was 14 and I was already having a really, a struggle in general, probably partially because of that never feeling like it was actually in place, but other reasons too. School was not good for me and all this shit. And so that all kind of conflated in this moment where I just for whatever reason, I did not want to talk to him, and I just was done with him. And through my parents' divorce, that was the one thing I kind of held true to, and I was allowed to, through fighting, really, through court when they were getting divorced, I was allowed to not talk to him. And yeah, so we had this non-relationship. I would see him maybe once a year or something, and I would begrudgingly do it and make the hangout a nightmare. I'd bring my friend Graham with me, who my father hated, and my goal was to just. And by the way, he ended up that woman that he was hooking up with ended up being pregnant and was probably pregnant like around the time we found out. So his long-term strategy just didn't seem right. Then they got married.
Oh my God!
And since divorced, so it was this whole fucking thing that
Jesus.
yeah, and now we have a great relationship.
Well, that's
yes,
good.
but it went through that machination that was pretty impossible.
Well, that's that sounds. I mean, that's so. You're also another thing that really like struck me there is like when your parents are doing this back and forth thing for those few years, you're like left to just kind of. They don't know what the fuck's going on, and then they're just like because they don't really. And then you're left to go. I have no idea what's going on, which is which I think builds in you like a weird sort of sense of. I just got to figure stuff out myself, which is another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with what you now do as a job. You've got to figure shit out yourself, like rather than them sit down and go, "This is what's happening," because they don't know. And it's kind of it's an early life lesson that I wouldn't advise anyone necessarily go through, but it probably inbuilds in you this kind of resolve and this ability to just kind of just crack on with life a little bit.
I think that is really true. I mean, I've even said that when my mother has kind of apologized for that time, I mean, any trauma, it's like, you obviously don't want to go through it. I mean, it's trauma, so it's difficult. But at such an early age, I was going through one of the hardest parts of my life as a kid. And it did teach me some resolve to, that you can't you cannot ignore the fact that time will change things in whatever capacity. When things are good, time will change and bad things will happen. When times are bad, time will change and better things will be around the corner. So, and it did. It teaches you resiliency. I mean, I mean, like you're saying, like obviously, like my father and mother weren't waiting around the corner, like you see, now you're ready for. Like they were just fucking idiots who just were not communicating to a child emotionally. But yeah, it did. It really I've thought that a lot. I also think it's completely like fucked up my ability to have like a normal relationship. Where I live in fear of the pending pain
of
that
course.
can like I'll end a relationship early that's like going pretty well. It's not going to work out, and they'll be like,
that's
we love each other.
interesting.
I know we love each other, but it's just who are we kidding? I mean, we're sitting here playing house. Come on, this isn't
interesting. I used to have I used to just similar commitment issues, but I don't think I ever got that far. I would just be like, I am not even going to give this the opportunity to be in any way
that
good
now,
because I didn't want to have a relationship that but then you just I mean, I'm not I'm about to I don't know what
Tell
the
me.
fuck I'm talking. No, I don't
me.
know. You just got to get lucky and you got to just let go of that shit and see what happens, right? But that's not easy. I'm not.
Well, how do you? But I mean, how often are you traveling and on the road?
Well, to be fair, I can't. Like, partly why I moved out here was because I want to do more writing and stuff that meant I didn't have to travel so much. I do think traveling away from other half is actually good now and again. I feel like every weekend is too much.
Yeah, and
then it gets. But when we started going out, she thought I did 1 gig a month. She didn't understand the comedy in the UK. She was like, "So you do like 1 gig a month?" I'm like, "No, I do." I was away like six nights a week. Out here, I'm much more like 3 nights a week, even just like local shows or whatever. And we write together on we were just finished writing on a show together. We're writing teams, so that's kind of lucky. Well, yeah, I mean, it could be awful, but luckily it's good. I can imagine it in certain relationships be terrible, but it is good. But yeah, that's just like a bit of luck. It's like a combination of meeting someone you get on with and also having shared ambition, which I think is a hard duality to kind of achieve.
How long have you been married?
6 years.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I definitely find that now too. I think it's like, and it's probably some, version of all of this combined for me, where it's like the fact that I now am able to travel and work even during a fucking nightmarish societal time, that to me takes precedent over anything. Like that to me is like, keep that security going. Do not let that go away. And I think you do sacrifice the ability to also in that time find balance to have like a healthy, normal relationship.
Yeah, it's a difficult. That's one of the shit things about the industry. Really, it's got to be finding that balance. But
yeah, it's very strange.
But I like the fact that you've I feel like there's a good kind of lesson. The fact you and your dad now get on really well and stuff. And like the thing you said about time was interesting. I feel like people were so like, something's fucked or something's amazing, and then just give it time. You'll grow, and people can repair stuff. And I think that's important, especially after the last couple of years. I'm like, that's nice that you guys are in a good spot now after what was a shitty time.
Yeah. No, I mean, you probably know this to some extent. Like, you do to some extent start to parent your parents eventually.
Oh,
and,
so much.
You know,
like,
I'm sure, your father, you're like, go to your room. Don't go to your room. Give me the keys. God damn it.
I'm like, just stay there. Don't move.
Yeah, just don't move. Just stay frozen. That's perfect. Yeah. Okay, the floor is lava.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy that part of it as well, because, you know, I feel like, you know, my father has had my father had a stroke literally almost a year ago to the day, and totally thought he was going to die. Mm-hmm. And then not only did he survive it, he's had like this miraculous recovery where it's pretty much like, I mean, it's just a crazy situation. It's not normal, but he's had a pretty much miraculous recovery where it's a barely impacted. It really hasn't impacted him long term.
That's great.
So you have that as well. It's like, you know, it makes you really appreciate them a lot. I recognize the realities of, you know, the health of your parents and how you do need to have an understanding of, you know, the fact that this doesn't go on forever, but really do enjoy the sharing of experience and, you know, getting to know your parents as adults. And like, you know, I love both my parents, but I also really am friends with both of my parents.
That's
now
great.
In a way that, is very, very satisfying.
That's great. One thing I started doing in the pandemic, actually, I started recording on Zooms just in case one of them was going to die. And then weirdly, my mum, I've talked about this before, was like she got diagnosed with very advanced cancer, but she's actually doing really well fighting it right now. And this crazy new therapy is really helping. But yeah, I was like, it's funny though, when I was doing it, we did it, and then my sister just went, I should have told them, but I didn't. I was like, I want it to be candid. My sister went, are you recording us? She went, stop.
Well, she's the only one who notices the thing that pops up that says,
yeah. My parents don't know what the
someone's recording this. They just click the got it. They're like, got it.
My sister just went, don't record this. And I was like, oh, come on. But then, you know, but the point being, it's nice to keep these memories and these because you know, this could be a podcast where I get people to come in and bitch about their parents, but actually it's not. It's more like people appreciating and understanding they're just two people trying their best and fucking up like we all do, and having a connection with them is important.
I always think about teachers, how, you know, when you're like 30 years old and you are the age of your teachers, and you're like, yeah, they were probably fucking hungover too. Like, you know, they seem to be these deities for a while, and then when you become that age, you go, oh, they're just two fucking people who had to figure out
exactly
a complicated situation. You know,
I have that whenever I'm a doctor that's like my age. I'm like, what? How do you know stuff, mate? Like, how do you know about?
How do
you know about inside things in the body?
Or how about? Have you ever? I mean, I've had this where you're talking to like, you know, like TV executives are like 24, and I'm just like, this fucking piece of shit.
I know. Do you know? I realize that about representation out here. I'm like, you're just a fucking guy struggling to make it in the industry. You don't know anything. You're just like, you're like, I hope this guy does well, and then I can get money off him. You don't know.
Well, the smart play is to go that route, to be like the person who makes money off the people, not to be the person who's like, I got to make the money, because then you have like 15 people who are gonna. One of them's gonna. I mean, you're just playing odds essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I often think that, like, you know, when I think back to how, you know, my mother. I mean, the idea of not having a child or not getting married when my mother was 19 was just not in the cards. I mean, it was just the next step. It was what you did. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people who, sort of like you said about your parents, I have relatives in my family who I'm like, I mean, if they were a young couple now and had this amount of friction, there's no way they would stick through it. Yeah. There was just this, like, you just put your fucking head down and keep going. And that's really what my parents did. But a lot of it was just the pressure of what people tell you you're supposed to do, which you still get. I mean, you still get people now who, tell you what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, and then it's just not true anymore.
Spot on, man. We've got to wrap this up. Before I do, though, I have my dad. I get him to research the guests a little bit, and by that, I send him a Wikipedia. So
Great.
He has got a question.
I love what I'm hearing already. Okay,
he's got a question for you based on his research about who you are that producer Paul is going to play to you right now.
The question I was going to ask him was, had you heard of the famous train journey that Abraham Lincoln did when he became president? Because when we moved to Eastbourne, one of my great success stories just in the first few months was involved in selling a ticket which was for this train journey. It's a tremendously important train journey in the sort of eastern part of America. Tickets are terribly rare. There's a few in the Library of Congress, and one turned up here in Eastbourne, which I sold for, I don't know, 5,000 quid or something. That would be about $7,000. I don't know what the exchange rate is.
Okay, so I'll ask him if he knows a lot about this train journey. Just so you know, he's not 270 years old, so he wouldn't have been there at the time. But you still wish.
No, but if he's interested in historic figures.
Okay, I'll ask him. All right, there we go. So that really encapsulates my dad. He had to show off how much money he made from selling an old train ticket. So, obviously
the
your
question
podcast
really became about your father, which is amazing.
Yeah, well,
In a great way.
What was he wants to know if you know about an Abraham.
The question is, do I know about that journey? Was the initial question?
Yeah, that was the initial question.
The exchange rate for how much he actually made for the ticket that he got because it ended up in your town.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, well, to answer your father's amazing question. Amazing question. I don't know if I know about that one specifically. I mean, that was how they used to have to sort of drum up support were train rides. So I don't know if there must be something more to it. I would like to counter with a question for your father. See if he knows about what happened to Lincoln's body after he died. Because Lincoln's body after he died was not buried for ages. It was buried a couple of different times. It was one of those bodies where they were sort of fighting over where the final resting place would be. There was a mausoleum where it was put in under the Capitol. Then I think the body was stolen. Then it did actually, I believe, do its own like tour where people could go see. This is when they would be like, go see bodies. So ask him that and see if he's gotten any tickets for that journey, because that would probably be worth a pretty penny.
All right, that will be asked on the Patreon, which is coming with this series.
Yeah.
So that will be.
Good.
I'll throw it back in his face, see how he handles it.
Yeah.
He'll probably know. He knows. That's what I said to you. He knows history, food, and money. Those are the two things.
My podcast, the thing is that I am the one who doesn't know anything. So I feel like we've maybe covered some of it on there before. Mm-hmm. But on my Wikipedia, it must say something about how it's a historical podcast.
Yeah, you're overestimating.
This guy knows history.
Yeah, exactly. How detailed. My dad's not going to learn that you're the one that is the less knowledgoable.
He saw it's a history show, so
he
he's
saw
like, this
history.
guy knows his shit.
He saw history. He saw America. He said Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
He goes, I've got a train ticket.
Yeah, he's got a train ticket. All right, final thing before we go. I'd like to wrap this up. All our guests, I try and get him to say, my dad's still trying to get him to say I love you. Although if he does, then the whole podcast premise is ruined. But do you have anything you would like me to pass on to my dad to encourage him to drop an I love you? Any sort of wisdom maybe passed down from your parents?
Here's what I would say. Well, I don't know if this is passed on from my parents necessarily. But
whatever, from you, that works.
And sometimes in relationships, again, which I've already said I'm terrible at, but sometimes there are moments where you say things not because you want to say them, but because of what it will do for someone else. And, so I remember many times where I've said I'm sorry over things that I thought were bullshit. So there's nothing wrong with gifting your son with an I love you,
there we go. Even
if it doesn't feel like something that you feel like saying, just to see what it does for him.
Interesting. I love that because that sounds. I'll pull a sorry just to get this argument over with, mate. So the day he's done.
Well, that was a learned lesson.
Yeah,
There were multiple times where I was like, I'm not sorry, and then eventually I was like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do.
This is a way. How do we take the Mario Kart shortcut across the lap? Just say sorry, and you just fucking rainbow roads.
What is my
jumping
apple
down.
cider vinegar solve?
Yeah, exactly.
Just a simple I'm sorry.
Just a simple I'm sorry, and then a simple I love you. I love that, mate. Thank you for spending time doing this. So, you want to plug your pod? People should know it already, but any plug you want to do? Or anything you want to plug?
My podcast
apart from apple cider vinegar.
Well, then I'll see you later, buddy. Take care. My podcast is The Dollop, and we're on tour all over the country. We're actually in Australia coming up. You can go to dolloppodcast.com. I am a touring comedian. You can go to GarethReynolds.com. And if you like stories about English parents, I remember when you saw me do one of my sets at West Side, you said to me, "God, you really got the English." And it wasn't even. It was really through just linking material. But eventually, I was like, "Yeah, there's like a 15-minute chunk here where I am just slagging off the English."
After I'd been on as well, so it was like you were like, "Fuck this guy."
Yeah, right. yeah, that's right. Right after you. Yeah. So you can go to GarethReynolds.com for any of that information.
Awesome, mate. Thanks so much, man. I love you.
Thank you. Love you. See? Feels good, doesn't it?
I like throwing that out and seeing who's like, oh, I'll say that back. And you were like, oh, I guess I have to say it, even though I don't really want to.
I love you.
Love you.
A podcast from producer Paul.co.uk.